During a family dinner at my daughter's house, I barely managed to keep myself from losing my temper. I went into the kitchen just to get a glass of water, but what I saw there turned everything upside down. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The phone rang on a Tuesday morning and I almost didn't answer. 4 months of silence from my daughter, and suddenly her name flashed on my screen like a ghost from a life I used to know. Dad? Faye's voice carried that familiar sweetness she used when she wanted something. I know we haven't talked in a while, but I was thinking, maybe you could come over for dinner next week. The kids miss their grandpa. I stared at my coffee mug, the one that said, Franklin County Prosecutor's Office, 28 years of service. A retirement gift from a life that felt more real than this conversation. The kids miss me? Of course they do. A pause. I miss you too, Dad. The last time we'd spoken, she'd asked for $15,000 for the roof, she'd said. 2 weeks later, her Facebook showed a gleaming Tesla Model X parked in their Bexley driveway. When I'd mentioned it, she'd called me controlling. Edwin had called me worse. What's the occasion? I asked. Does there need to be one? It's almost Christmas. Family time. Family. The word felt hollow. I thought about the $50,000 I'd lent them 3 years ago for their house down payment. Still waiting on that repayment. I thought about their wedding. $32,000 I'd scraped together because every girl deserves her dream day. I thought about every Sunday dinner I'd hosted, every school play I'd attended, every time I'd put Faye first. Sure, I said, I'll be there. The week crawled by. I kept my routine, morning walks through Clintonville, coffee at Roosevelt's, chess with Earl Thompson at the community center. Earl had been a detective for Columbus PD for 20 years before moving to financial crimes. Sharp mind, sharper instincts. You look worried, he said, moving his bishop. Faye invited me to dinner. He whistled low. After 4 months? What's she want? That's the question, isn't it? Earl captured my night. Victor, I've known you since you prosecuted the Riverside corruption case. You taught me to trust my gut. What's yours saying? That this isn't about the kids missing their grandpa. Then why go? I moved my rook, because she's still my daughter. The night arrived cold and clear. I drove my 10-year-old Honda Civic through streets lined with holiday lights, toward the house I'd helped them buy. 482 Drexel Avenue sat in Bexley's most expensive neighborhood. Houses pushing $600,000, manicured lawns, 3-car garages. Their mortgage had to be $3,200 a month, minimum. On Edwin's nonprofit salary, the front door opened before I could knock. Faye stood there in a designer dress I didn't recognize, her smile bright and brittle. Dad, you made it! She hugged me quickly, perfume expensive and unfamiliar. The house behind her gleamed, new furniture, fresh paint. Everything screaming money they shouldn't have. Edwin appeared in the hallway, 6'2" of practiced charm in a custom suit. Victor, good to see you, sir. His handshake was firm enough to prove something. Come in, come in. We've got quite the spread tonight. The dining room table could have fed 12. Prime rib, lobster tails, wine that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The kids, 6 and 4, sat quietly in clothes that still had creases from the store. This is incredible, I said, because what else could I say? Edwin got a bonus from the foundation, Faye said quickly, too quickly. They're doing amazing work. Heroes Hope Foundation. Edwin poured wine like he was performing. We raised over $400,000 this year for veterans. Prosthetics, counseling, housing assistance. Life-changing stuff. I watched him talk. This man who'd married my daughter 8 years ago. Back then he'd been earnest, hard-working, grateful for every opportunity. When did the gratitude turn to entitlement? When did the warmth become calculation? That's generous, I said. Veterans deserve every bit of help they can get. My father had served in Vietnam, came back with pieces missing that had nothing to do with his body. He'd taught me about service, sacrifice, honor, things that apparently skipped a generation. Exactly, Edwin leaned forward. Which is why I wanted to talk to you tonight, Victor. We're starting a new initiative. Edwin, let him eat first. Faye's interruption was sharp, but Edwin was already in motion, standing, pacing like he owned the room. This can't wait, honey. Victor, we need $25,000 for a pilot program. 6 months, we could double our impact. But funding timelines are tight, and I thought, well, You've always been generous with Faye. This would be an investment in something that really matters. There it was. The real reason for the dinner, the smiles, the expensive food I hadn't touched. 25,000, I repeated. It's tax deductible, he said, as if that made it reasonable. And honestly, what else are you doing with your pension? Sitting on it while people who served our country go without? The presumption stole my breath. Faye wouldn't meet my eyes. I appreciate the opportunity, I kept my voice level. But that's not something I can do right now. Edwin's smile tightened. Can't or won't. Does it matter? Dad. Faye's voice carried an edge. Edwin explained the program. These are veterans who need— I know what veterans need, I said quietly. I also know what family means, or what it used to mean. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Edwin's jaw clenched. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm still waiting on the 50,000 I lent you 3 years ago. That was different, Faye snapped. That was for our house, our future. And you were going to pay it back. We've had expenses? Like a $78,000 BMW. The words came out harder than I'd intended. Like a Tesla? Like this house that's twice what you need? Edwin stood abruptly. I think you should leave. I think I should too. I stood, my napkin falling to the floor like a white flag. Faye's face had gone red, tears forming, but they felt performative. How long had I been a wallet to them instead of family? As I walked toward the door, something shifted inside me. Not anger, not yet. Just a cold, clear recognition of what I'd become to the people I love most. Dad, wait, Faye called, but I was already outside. The December air bit through my jacket. I sat in my car for a long moment, hands shaking. Not from hurt, from something else. A feeling I recognized from my prosecutor days, when a case finally clicked into place. Then my chest tightened, pressure spreading, breath catching. I'd felt this before, stress-induced hypertension. My doctor had warned me to stay calm, avoid confrontation. I reached for my phone to call him, then stopped. Through the front window, I could see Edwin gesturing angrily, Faye crying. My grandchildren sat frozen at that expensive table, watching their parents' perfect facade crack. I needed water. Maybe I needed to try one more time. I got out of the car and walked back to the house. I didn't knock. The door wasn't locked. They'd left it open in their certainty I wouldn't return. Pride does that. Makes you careless. The argument echoed through the foyer, Edwin's voice sharp and bitter. Your father always has to make everything about him, always the righteous prosecutor, looking down on everyone. He just doesn't understand our situation, Faye said, defensive but softer. No, he understands perfectly. He likes keeping you dependent, control through money, classic manipulation. I stood there, hand on my chest, feeling the pressure ease slightly. Funny how anger can override physical pain. But I needed that water. My mouth tasted like copper. The kitchen sat adjacent to the dining room, through an archway to the left. I moved quietly, my prosecutor's instincts still sharp after 5 years of retirement. In court, I'd learned to observe, to notice details others missed. That skill didn't retire. The kitchen was another showpiece. Marble countertops, commercial-grade appliances, pendant lights that probably cost more than my first car. And there, on the island, sat a leather portfolio. Open. I wasn't snooping. I was reaching for a glass in the cabinet when my eyes caught the header. Heroes Hope Foundation, Financial Overview, Q3 2024. 28 years as a prosecutor teaches you to recognize certain patterns, invoice discrepancies, irregular payment schedules, ghost vendors. The documents practically screamed at me. Patriot Medical Supply, $47,000. I'd never heard of them. A quick scan showed 3 more like it. Freedom Prosthetics, $62,000. Veterans First Equipment, $58,000. My hands moved on autopilot, pulling out my phone. Years of documenting evidence dies hard. I photographed the first page, then the second. Bank statements showing wire transfers to accounts in Delaware, corporate havens for people hiding something. The foundation had raised $427,000. The disbursements to actual veterans, maybe $40,000. The rest disappeared into a web of shell companies and offshore accounts. My father's face flashed in my mind. How he'd struggled after Vietnam, waiting months for the VA to approve his disability claim. How he'd chosen between medication and groceries. How he died still believing his country valued his service. Edwin was stealing from people like my father. "What are you doing?" I turned. Edwin stood in the archway, his face transitioning from confusion to alarm as he saw what I held. The portfolio, his financial confession. "These are private documents." He moved forward, hand outstretched. "These are evidence." My voice came out flat, prosecutorial. "You've been embezzling from a veterans charity, Edwin, wire fraud, falsifying tax documents. These Delaware accounts, let me guess, you're the beneficial owner hiding behind an LLC?" His face drained of color, then flushed. "You went through my things. They were sitting open on your kitchen counter, where you left them because you never thought someone might actually look. Arrogance is expensive, Edwin. You have no right." I pulled out my phone, started dialing. "What are you doing?" Panic crept into his voice. "Calling 911. He lunged, 6'2", 30 years younger, but I'd spent a career dealing with desperate people. I stepped aside, let his momentum carry him past me. He caught himself on the counter, breathing hard. "You're making a huge mistake," he hissed. "Those documents are confidential foundation business. You're trespassing, you're— 911, what's your emergency?" "This is Victor Harrison. I'm at 482 Drexel Avenue in Bexley. I need to report financial crimes. Embezzlement from a federally funded charity. I have documentary evidence." Edwin's expression cycled through denial, rage, fear, calculation. Watching it was like seeing a card sharp realize the deck was marked against him. "Dad?" Faye appeared, her eyes red from crying. "What's happening?" "Your husband has been stealing from wounded veterans," I said quietly. $400,000, give or take. "That's insane!" Edwin's voice pitched high. "Faye, he's lost his mind. He broke into our house, went through private papers. I walked through an unlocked door because I felt ill. Your papers were open on the counter. And unless I'm mistaken, Heroes Hope Foundation received federal grants last year. That makes this federal wire fraud, Edwin. 5 to 20 years. The dispatcher asked me to stay on the line. I could hear sirens already. Living in Bexley had its advantages. Response times averaged under 4 minutes. Faye looked between us, her world fracturing in real time. "Edwin, is this true?" "Of course not. Baby, he's lying. He's angry because we wouldn't let him control our lives." "The bank statements show wire transfers totaling $397,000 to Delaware shell corporations," I said, still holding my phone up, the photos clear on the screen. "The invoices are fraudulent. I can tell because Patriot Medical Supply lists an address that's actually a UPS store in Newark. I prosecuted cases like this for 3 decades, Faye. I know what I'm seeing." She stepped back from Edwin like he'd become radioactive. "You promised those funds were going to veterans. You stood in front of the Chamber of Commerce and talked about the single mother whose son lost his legs." "I helped people," Edwin's voice cracked. "We did help people. Maybe I took some operational costs. Maybe the accounting got complicated, but operational costs don't hide in Delaware LLCs," I said. Red and blue lights washed through the kitchen windows. Edwin looked at the door, at me, at Faye. I watched the calculation happen. Run, fight, deflect. He chose deflect. "This is persecution," he said, voice suddenly calm, controlled. "You've wanted me gone since day one, Victor. You can't stand that Faye chose me, that we built something you couldn't control. Now you're weaponizing your old prosecutor buddies to destroy us. Smart. Establishing the narrative before the police arrived. But I'd taught that trick to dozens of ADAs." The doorbell rang. Faye didn't move, so I walked past her, past Edwin's silent rage, and opened it. Earl Thompson stood there in plain clothes, his detective shield clipped to his belt. Behind him, 2 uniformed officers. "Victor?" He took in the scene with experienced eyes. "You sounded serious on the dispatch." "Financial fraud," I said. "Embezzlement from a federally funded veterans charity. I have photos of the evidence. It was in plain sight when I entered the kitchen for water." Earl's expression didn't change, but I saw the shift in his posture. All business now. "And the subject?" "Edwin Gibson. He's the director of Heroes Hope Foundation." Earl nodded to the uniforms who moved past me. Edwin had his phone out, probably texting his lawyer. Faye stood frozen, her designer dress suddenly looking like a costume. "Mr. Gibson?" Earl's voice carried authority earned over 2 decades. "I'm Detective Thompson, Columbus PD Financial Crimes Unit. I need to ask you some questions about Heroes Hope Foundation." "I want my lawyer," Edwin said immediately. "That's your right." Earl turned to me. "Victor, I'll need those photos, and we'll need your statement." I handed him my phone, watched his eyes move across the screen, seeing what I'd seen. 28 years working together. We didn't need words. "We'll need to secure these documents as evidence," Earl said. "Mr. Gibson, are you the owner of the LLCs listed in these Delaware filings?" "Lawyer," Edwin repeated. "Okay." Earl gestured to the officers. "We're seizing these materials as evidence of potential federal crimes. Mr. Gibson, you're not under arrest at this time, but I strongly suggest you remain available for questioning." Faye finally found her voice. "This is a mistake. There's an explanation." "Ma'am, there usually is," one of the officers said, not unkindly. He began photographing the documents, then carefully collecting them into evidence bags. I stood there, watching my daughter's life disassemble. The grandfather clock in their foyer, probably worth $5,000, chimed 8 times. 8 o'clock on a night that started with prime rib and ended with police evidence bags. Edwin's eyes found mine, pure hatred, unfiltered. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said. "But those veterans won't." Earl touched my arm. "Let's get your statement outside." I followed him into the December cold, leaving Faye standing in her magazine Perfect Kitchen, finally understanding what her husband really was, and what her father had always been. The uniformed officers emerged carrying boxes of evidence. Earl's phone was already out, calling the federal prosecutor's office. Wire fraud crossed state lines. This would go federal fast. "You okay?" Earl asked me quietly. "No," I said honestly, "but I'm right." "Yeah." He squeezed my shoulder. "You usually are." The next week passed in a blur of statements, interviews, and phone calls I didn't want to answer. Earl kept me updated. The FBI had taken over the case, federal prosecutors were building their file, forensic accountants were tracing every dollar Edwin had touched. The machine I'd once been part of was grinding forward, methodical and relentless. Faye didn't call. I told myself I expected that. I was lying. My neighbor Hattie Morrison knocked on my door that Saturday morning with a casserole I didn't need, and concern I probably did. She'd been a nurse for 40 years before retiring, which meant she could read vital signs even when people thought they were hiding them. "You look terrible," she said, pushing past me into my kitchen. "Good morning to you too." "Don't sass me, Victor Harrison." She set the casserole on my counter, chicken and rice from the smell. "The whole neighborhood's talking. Linda Matthews saw the police at your daughter's house, said there were evidence boxes. Small towns and wealthy suburbs, same gossip, different property values." "It's complicated," I said. "It always is." She poured herself coffee without asking, settled into my breakfast nook like she owned it. "You want to talk about it?" "Not particularly." "Then I'll talk and you'll listen." She sipped her coffee, grimaced at my cheap Folgers. "I've known Faye since she was 6 years old, playing in your backyard. Sweet girl, smart. Then she married that Edwin, and I watched her change. Little things at first. Less time for friends, expensive purse she couldn't afford, that smile that never quite reached her eyes anymore. I sat down across from her. Outside, December snow had started falling, soft and quiet. "Sometimes people become who they marry," Hattie continued. "Sometimes they were always that person, just waiting for permission. Which is she?" "I don't know anymore." "Yes, you do. You're just afraid of the answer." The coffee tasted bitter, or maybe that was just my mood. "He was stealing from veterans, men and women who gave everything. My father was a veteran, I remember." Hattie's voice gentled. "And you did the right thing, Victor. Don't let anyone tell you different." My phone buzzed. A text from Earl. "Call me when you can. Developments." I excused myself, stepped into my study. Dialed. "We arrested him this morning," Earl said without preamble. "Federal charges, wire fraud, embezzlement, falsifying tax documents. Bail set at $250,000. I absorbed that. $250,000. Edwin didn't have that kind of cash. Not the legitimate kind, anyway. How'd he take it? Like a man who thought money could buy him out of anything." Earl's tone was dry. "His lawyer's already calling it a witch hunt. Claims you have a personal vendetta, that the evidence was obtained illegally." I didn't break into their house. I know, the prosecutor knows, but expect them to fight dirty. Edwin's hired Marcus Webb. I whistled low. Webb was Columbus's most expensive defense attorney, $500 an hour minimum, with a reputation for turning juries against prosecutors instead of defendants. That'll cost him $40,000-50,000 just for pretrial work, I said. Yeah, well, desperate people make expensive decisions. A pause. Victor, there's something else. Faye posted bail. The words hit harder than they should have. How? Sold her jewelry, got a loan from Edwin's parents. She's standing by him publicly. Called a press conference for Monday, actually. Says you've always been controlling, that you couldn't handle her success. I looked out my window at the snow, watched it cover everything in white, making the world look clean when it wasn't. She really believes him, I said, or she's invested too much to admit she was wrong. 8 years of marriage, 2 kids, a house she helped pay for with money she thought was legitimate. Tough to walk away from that. After we hung up, I sat in my study for a long time. This room held my career, plaques from the Ohio Prosecuting Attorneys Association, a letter from the governor thanking me for my service, photographs of cases won and criminals convicted. 28 years of believing in justice. But justice for my own daughter felt like failure. Monday's press conference played out exactly as Webb had scripted it. Edwin stood beside Faye on the steps of the Franklin County Courthouse, looking humble in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Faye wore black, appropriately somber, her eyes red from what I hoped were real tears. My father-in-law is a good man, she told the cameras, voice shaking just enough. But he's also used to being in control. When Edwin and I built our own success, our own life, he couldn't accept it. This prosecution is about a bitter old man who can't let go. Webb took over smoothly, talking about irregularities in evidence collection, about Victor Harrison's well-documented history of aggressive prosecution tactics, about how the real victims here were the Gibson family, 2 young children watching their father be persecuted. I watched it alone in my living room. The local news ran it as their top story. My phone exploded. Friends from the prosecutor's office, former colleagues, people I hadn't spoken to in years, most supportive, some questioning. A few I noticed didn't call at all. The Columbus Dispatch ran a profile piece that Wednesday. Former prosecutor Victor Harrison, Justice or Vengeance. They interviewed Faye, Edwin's lawyer, board members from Heroes Hope Foundation. The photo they used of me was from a corruption trial 15 years ago. I looked harsh, unforgiving, exactly the image Webb wanted. They interviewed me too, briefly. I told them the truth. I saw evidence of a crime and reported it. That's what any citizen should do. The quote they ran, Harrison admits to examining private financial documents. Context I'd learned over 3 decades was always the first casualty of a good story. Earl called that Thursday. How you holding up? I've been better. Yeah, well, you might want to pour yourself something stronger than coffee. Edwin's filing a civil suit against you. Defamation, invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress. $500,000 in damages. I actually laughed, couldn't help it. He steals from wounded veterans and I'm the bad guy? His lawyer's smart, Victor. He's making this about you, not about the evidence. Jury sees a grieving daughter, a family man trying to help heroes, and a vengeful ex-prosecutor with a grudge. The evidence doesn't lie. Evidence doesn't matter if the narrative's strong enough. You taught me that. He was right. I had taught him that. Back when I was on the other side, building cases, shaping stories for juries who wanted simple answers to complicated questions. The FBI's solid on their case, Earl continued. Financial forensics came back. They traced $397,000 through shell companies in Delaware and the Caymans. Found evidence Edwin was gambling it away through offshore casinos. Wire transfers, crypto conversions, the works. Gambling? That was new. Online poker mostly. High-stakes tables. He was down about $180,000 before he started winning some back. The foundation was his personal ATM machine. I thought about that. Edwin's desperation made more sense now. Not just greed, but addiction. The kind that makes you betray everything because you're always one big win away from fixing it all. When's the federal trial? I asked. Not until May at the earliest. These things take time. But, Victor, the civil suit against you, that's next month. And unlike the federal case, that's about perception, not evidence. After Earl hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my study. Outside, my street looked peaceful. Old houses, older trees, the kind of neighborhood where nothing bad was supposed to happen. But bad things happened everywhere. I'd learned that prosecuting criminals for 3 decades. What I was learning now was that sometimes the criminals sat at your daughter's dinner table. Sometimes they called you dad. My phone buzzed again, a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Susan Rivera, federal prosecutor. I'm lead on the Gibson case. We should talk. Coffee tomorrow, 10 a.m., Third and Long Cafe?" Susan. I'd mentored her 15 years ago when she was fresh out of law school, helped her understand that prosecution wasn't about winning. It was about truth. She'd gone federal, made a name for herself in white-collar crime. I texted back, "I'll be there." Something in my chest loosened. Not relief exactly, but recognition. The machine wasn't just grinding. It was being guided by someone who understood what this was really about. That night, I pulled out old photo albums, found pictures of Faye's childhood, birthday parties, school plays. That summer we'd driven to Myrtle Beach in a station wagon that barely made it. She'd been 9, collecting seashells, laughing at nothing. When had that girl disappeared? Or had she ever really existed outside my own hopes? Third and Long Cafe sat in the Short North Arts District, the kind of place where lawyers met clients they didn't want seen at their offices. I arrived 15 minutes early, ordered black coffee, and watched the door. Susan Rivera walked in at exactly 10. Tailored suit, briefcase that cost more than my monthly pension, the confidence of someone who'd won more cases than she'd lost. She'd been 25 when I'd mentored her, fresh-faced and idealistic. Now she was 40, sharp-edged and practical. "Victor," she shook my hand firmly. "You look good. You were always a terrible liar." She smiled, ordered an espresso, settled across from me. "I've been reading the file. It's solid. Forensic accounting traced every dollar. Delaware LLCs, Cayman accounts, crypto conversions to offshore gambling sites. Edwin Gibson's looking at serious time. But his attorney's good. Webb's already filed 17 motions. Suppression of evidence, prosecutorial misconduct, selective prosecution. He's building a narrative that you orchestrated this whole thing out of family vendetta." I sipped my coffee. It was better than what I made at home, which wasn't saying much. "The evidence speaks for itself." "Evidence rarely speaks, Victor. You taught me that." She pulled out a tablet, showed me Webb's motion to dismiss. "Look at this language. Mr. Harrison, a former prosecutor with 28 years of experience in evidence collection and criminal procedure, deliberately positioned himself to discover documents he knew would be present, then manipulated law enforcement contacts to initiate an investigation he knew would destroy his son-in-law's career and reputation. I went to get water. After a fight where you accused them of financial irresponsibility, after they refused to give you money, they asked me for money. Webb will spin it differently." Susan closed the tablet. "He's good at what he does, and juries love a sympathetic defendant more than they love complicated financial crimes. So, what do you need from me?" "Honesty, complete honesty." She leaned forward. "Did you suspect Edwin before that night?" I thought about it, really thought. Not specifically, but I knew something was off. The cars, the house, the lifestyle that didn't match a non-profit director's salary. I thought maybe Faye had family money I didn't know about. Or Edwin's parents were supporting them. "But you didn't investigate?" "I'm retired, Susan. I play chess and drink bad coffee. I don't investigate my own family." "Until you did." The words hung between us. Outside, January snow had started again, coating High Street in fresh white. "What's the timeline?" I asked. "Grand jury convenes next week. Indictment's a formality. We have bank records, emails, testimony from the foundation's former accountant, who was fired when she started asking questions. Trial's set for early May. But, Victor, the civil suit against you, that's next month, and that's where this gets complicated." "How so?" "Webb's strategy is to put you on trial instead of Edwin. If he can convince a civil jury that you violated Edwin's privacy, that you had ulterior motives, it undermines the criminal case, creates reasonable doubt before we even get to May." I absorbed that. Classic defense attorney move, attack the witness, not the evidence. I'd seen it 1,000 times, hadn't expected to be on the receiving end. "What do I do?" "Get your own attorney, document everything, every interaction with Faye and Edwin for the last 5 years. Every loan, every gift, every conversation. And Victor? She met my eyes. Prepare for Faye to testify against you. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lay in bed watching shadows cross my ceiling, thinking about testimony, about Faye on a witness stand, Webb asking her carefully crafted questions. Did your father approve of your husband? No. Did he try to control your financial decisions? Yes. Did he express anger when you refused to borrow money from him? Truth twisted into weapon. It was brilliant, really. Webb had probably already coached her for hours. The next morning, I hired an attorney, Daniel Price, a civil litigator I'd worked with on a corruption case years ago. He charged $2.50 an hour, reasonable for Columbus. We met in his office on Broad Street, reviewed Webb's complaint. It's aggressive, Daniel said, flipping through pages. Defamation, invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress. They're throwing everything at the wall. What's my exposure? Worst case, they win all counts. You're looking at $500,000 in damages. More realistic, they're hoping you'll settle. $30,000-$40,000 to make it go away. Sign an NDA. Discredit your testimony before the criminal trial. I'm not settling. Daniel looked at me over his reading glasses. Victor, I have to ask, is there anything in your past with Faye and Edwin that could hurt us? Anything Webb could use? I thought about every interaction, every dinner, every attempt to be part of their lives. I lent them $50,000 for their house, never got it back, paid for their wedding, $32,000. Sent birthday money to the grandkids they rarely let me see. Last time I offered financial advice, Faye called me controlling. Did you say anything threatening, anything that could be construed as harassment? I told them they were living beyond their means. That was harassment, apparently. Daniel made notes. We'll need witnesses, people who can testify to your character, your relationship with Faye before Edwin. Hattie Morrison, my neighbor, Earl Thompson from CPD, Susan Rivera. The prosecutor on the criminal case, she knows me, knows I wouldn't fabricate evidence. Good. He closed his folder. Discovery starts next week. Be prepared, they'll request everything. Bank records, emails, text messages. They'll depose you, probably for 8 to 10 hours. Webb will try to make you lose your temper. I spent 30 years putting criminals on the stand. I can handle Marcus Webb. Famous last words, as it turned out. The deposition happened on a gray February morning. Webb's conference room overlooked the Scioto River, all glass and steel and carefully curated success. Edwin sat in the corner with Faye, both of them dressed like they were attending a funeral, my funeral, presumably. Webb was polished, professional, relentless. Mr. Harrison, you testified that you went to your daughter's home for water, but you also testified you'd just had a stressful conversation. Isn't it true you went into that kitchen looking for something to use against your son-in-law? No. You're an experienced prosecutor. You know how to build a case. You knew that kitchen was where Edwin kept his work materials, didn't you? I knew it was where people typically keep glasses. Please answer the question, Mr. Harrison, Daniel intervened. He did answer it. Webb smiled, turned a page. Let's talk about your relationship with Ms. Faye Gibson. You've given her substantial financial support over the years, haven't you? I'm her father. $50,000 for a house down payment. $32,000 for a wedding. Various gifts totaling approximately $15,000 more. That's nearly $100,000. I wanted to help my daughter. Or control her? Webb's tone stayed pleasant. Isn't it true that when Faye started making her own financial decisions with her husband, you became resentful? No. You testified you disapproved of their lifestyle. I disapproved of them asking me for $25,000 when they owed me $50,000. So you were angry. I was disappointed. Angry enough to destroy your son-in-law's career? I reported a crime. That's what citizens do. Webb consulted his notes. Let the silence stretch. Classic intimidation. Mr. Harrison, isn't it true you've always had difficulty accepting your daughter's choices? Her marriage, her husband, her independence? I looked at Faye. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Edwin had his hand on hers, possessive and protective. I've had difficulty, I said slowly, accepting that my daughter chose a man who steals from wounded veterans. Objection, Daniel said. Move to strike. Webb waved it away. Withdrawn. Mr. Harrison, do you have any evidence at all, beyond the documents you illegally reviewed, that Edwin Gibson committed crimes? I didn't review them illegally, They were in plain sight. That's not what I asked. And there it was. The trap. If I said no, I admitted I had no independent knowledge. If I said yes, I'd have to reveal what else I'd found. Because I had found something else. Something I hadn't told Earl, or Susan, or Daniel. Something that changed everything. "Mr. Harrison?" Webb prompted. "Do you need the question repeated?" I looked at Daniel. He gave a slight nod. "Answer carefully." "I have the evidence the FBI has," I said. "Bank records, wire transfers, fraudulent invoices. That's sufficient." Webb smiled like he'd won something. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. No further questions." The deposition ended. Edwin and Faye left without a word, their footsteps echoing in Webb's expensive hallway. Daniel gathered his files, asked if I was okay. I lied and said yes. What I didn't tell him was this. 3 days after the police had seized Edwin's documents, I'd done something I probably shouldn't have. I'd called an old contact from my prosecuting days, a private investigator named Rick Dawson, who specialized in financial crimes and owed me favors from a case I'd helped him with years ago. "Just background," I'd told Rick. "Nothing illegal. Public records, social media, business filings." Rick had called back 2 days later. "Your son-in-law is interesting. Besides the obvious fraud, I found something else. He's been paying a woman named Valerie Chen $1,500 a month for the last 2 years. Rent for an apartment in German Village." The name had meant nothing then. It meant something now. I drove to German Village that afternoon, breaking every promise I'd made to Daniel about staying away from the case. The address was a renovated brownstone on South 3rd Street. Expensive even by German Village standards. Rent probably ran $3,000 a month. I sat in my car across the street for 20 minutes, feeling every one of my 63 years. What was I doing? Playing detective like I was still 40 and bulletproof? The door opened. A woman emerged, late 20s, professional attire, briefcase. Not what I'd expected, though I wasn't sure what I had expected. I got out of my car before I could talk myself out of it. "Excuse me, are you Valerie?" She turned cautious. "Who's asking?" "My name is Victor Harrison. I think we need to talk about Edwin Gibson." Her expression shifted, surprise, then recognition, then something like relief. "You're Faye's father. You know Faye?" "I know of her." Valerie glanced at the brownstone, then at me. "How did you find me?" "I was a prosecutor for 28 years. Finding people is what I did." She studied me for a long moment. "There's a coffee shop 2 blocks away, Stoff's. Meet me there in 10 minutes. And Mr. Harrison, come alone or I disappear." Stoff's Coffee Roasters occupied a corner spot, all exposed brick and local art. Valerie was already at a back table when I arrived, 2 cups of coffee waiting. "I wasn't sure you'd come," I said. "I wasn't sure I would either." She wrapped her hands around her cup. "But I've been waiting for someone to ask the right questions. Might as well be you. What's your relationship with Edwin?" "I'm his accountant, or I was." She pulled out her phone, showed me a screenshot of a contract. "He hired me 2 years ago to manage the foundation's books. Paid me well, $3,600 a month, plus this apartment." "Why the apartment?" "He said it was easier for me to work late hours if I lived close to downtown. I thought it was generous." Her laugh was bitter. "Turns out it was a bribe. For what? To not ask questions about where the money was going. To process invoices I knew were fake. To wire transfer funds to accounts that had nothing to do with veterans." She met my eyes. "I was complicit, Mr. Harrison. I knew what he was doing, and I took his money anyway because $3,600 a month pays off student loans fast." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I got fired 3 weeks ago when I finally grew a conscience and started asking questions. Because my apartment lease ends next month and I can't afford it without Edwin's money. Because I'm tired of being part of something that steals from people who served our country." She pushed a flash drive across the table. "This is everything. Every invoice, every transfer, every email Edwin sent me with instructions. Dates, amounts, account numbers." I stared at the flash drive. "Why not go to the FBI?" "I did, 2 weeks ago. They said they'd be in touch." Her smile was sad, but the feds move slow, and Edwin's lawyer is already building a defense that pins everything on me, the rogue accountant who embezzled funds and framed her boss. I need insurance. "What do you want from me?" "Give this to the prosecutor. Tell her I'll testify." I'll take whatever plea deal they offer, but I want Edwin to face what he did. She stood. I looked you up, Mr. Harrison. 28 years, 87% conviction rate, prosecutor of the year in 2015. People like you don't frame innocent men. If Edwin's going down, it's because he earned it. She left. I sat there holding a flash drive that could bury Edwin completely from someone I couldn't tell anyone I'd contacted without admitting I'd hired a private investigator and potentially compromised the case. But I could give it to Susan, anonymously, through channels that protected Valerie and kept me out of it. That evening, I met Earl at his house in Upper Arlington. His wife made dinner, pot roast that reminded me of better times, while we sat in his study with the door closed. You look like you've seen things you can't unsee, Earl said. I told him about Valerie, about the flash drive, about the impossible position I was in. Victor, you can't... I know, but the information exists. If I happen to mention to Susan that the FBI should follow up on their interview with Valerie Chen, accountant for Heroes Hope Foundation, would that be obstruction? Earl was quiet for a long moment. That would be a retired prosecutor sharing general information with a federal prosecutor. Happens all the time. And if that prosecutor happened to find additional evidence, then that would be good police work. He refilled our glasses, bourbon, the expensive kind. You're walking a fine line. I've been walking fine lines for 3 decades. This is different. This is your daughter. Which is exactly why I can't let a guilty man walk free just because he married her. I called Susan the next morning, professional, careful. The FBI interviewed an accountant named Valerie Chen, former employee of Heroes Hope. You might want to follow up. Why would I do that? Susan's tone was neutral. Because accountants keep records, especially when they think they might need them. A pause. Thank you for the tip, Victor. 2 weeks later, the Columbus Dispatch ran a story. Former Foundation accountant cooperating with federal investigation. The article mentioned Valerie Chen, 32 years old, CPA with 10 years of experience, providing testimony and documentation in the Edwin Gibson case. My phone rang within an hour. Webb's number. You just made a serious mistake, Victor, he said without preamble. I don't know what you're talking about. Somehow, the FBI found my client's former accountant. Somehow, she has documentation that's not in the original evidence file. Somehow, this all happened after you hired a private investigator. My blood went cold. I haven't hired anyone. Rick Dawson, $2,000 retainer paid from your personal checking account 3 weeks ago. Public record, Victor. You're a prosecutor. You should know better. I'd been stupid, careless. Rick had filed the payment as income, which meant it existed in the system. Mr. Dawson conducted legal research, I said carefully, on my client's financial affairs, while my client is under federal investigation at the direction of a witness in that investigation. It's called witness tampering, Victor. Or, didn't they teach you that in prosecutor school? He hung up. I stood in my kitchen, phone in hand, realizing I'd just given Webb ammunition to destroy not just me, but potentially the entire case against Edwin. Daniel Price called an hour later. Webb just filed an emergency motion to dismiss the criminal charges, claims prosecutorial misconduct, witness tampering, fruit of the poisonous tree. He's asking for sanctions against you and the federal prosecutors. Can he win? He shouldn't. But he's making noise, and noise creates doubt. The civil trial is in 2 weeks, Victor. This just gave him everything he needs. That night, I sat in my study with the lights off, looking at photographs of Faye. Birthday parties, graduations, her wedding day. In every photo, she was smiling, happy. Or at least I thought so. Had I done the right thing? Or had I let my righteous anger destroy whatever chance we'd had at rebuilding our relationship? The answer came the next morning, an envelope in my mailbox, no return address. Inside, a single photograph. Edwin and Faye, standing in front of a "for sale" sign outside their Bexley house. On the back, in Faye's handwriting, "We're losing everything because of you. I hope you're satisfied." But what caught my attention was something else. The Tesla was gone from their driveway. In its place, a 10-year-old Honda Accord, the first crack in their perfect facade. And despite everything, despite the pain and the accusations and the civil suit threatening to bankrupt me, I felt something cold and satisfied settle in my chest. Justice moves slow, but it moves. The civil trial began on a Monday morning in late February under skies the color of old steel. Franklin County Courthouse, 3rd floor, courtroom. I'd walked through 1,000 times as a prosecutor. Now I sat at the defendant's table, Daniel beside me, while Webb prepared to tear apart my reputation. Edwin and Faye sat across the aisle. She'd lost weight, I noticed, dark circles under her eyes. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by something off the rack from Macy's. Edwin wore the same suit from the deposition, though it looked more worn now. Financial pressure was showing. Good. Judge Patricia Morrison, no relation to my neighbor Hattie, called the court to order. Webb stood, smooth as silk. Your Honor, this case is about a man who couldn't accept his daughter's independence. Victor Harrison, a former prosecutor with nearly 3 decades of experience in criminal investigation, deliberately violated my client's privacy to destroy their lives out of personal vendetta, Daniel countered. This case is about a father who discovered evidence of a federal crime and did what any citizen should, report it to authorities. The subsequent investigation revealed systemic fraud that victimized wounded veterans. Webb's first witness was Faye. She took the stand in a navy dress, hands shaking as she was sworn in. I wanted to look away. Couldn't. Ms. Gibson, how would you describe your relationship with your father before these events? Complicated. Her voice was soft. He was always generous, but there were strings attached. He wanted control over my decisions. Can you give an example? When Edwin and I bought our house, Dad lent us $50,000 for the down payment. But every time we saw him, he'd mention it, ask about repayment, make us feel guilty for not having the money immediately. That stung, because it was partially true. I had mentioned it. Not to guilt them, to remind them that loans get repaid. But context didn't matter here. And when you declined to accept his financial advice, he became angry, accused us of living beyond our means, of being irresponsible. He couldn't accept that Edwin was successful in his own right. Webb walked her through the dinner, the confrontation, my return to their house. Faye painted me as controlling, manipulative, unable to let go. Some of it was her truth. Some was Edwin's coaching. I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Daniel's cross-examination was gentle but pointed. Ms. Gibson, you testified that your father was controlling, but he also paid for your wedding, correct? Yes. $32,000? Yes. And he asked for nothing in return? Faye hesitated. No. He attended your children's birthday parties, school events, brought gifts. Yes. Until when? Until Edwin and I asked him to respect our boundaries. By boundaries, do you mean his objection to being asked for $25,000 while still owed $50,000? Webb objected. Judge Morrison sustained it, but the jury had heard it. The trial continued for 3 days. Webb called Edwin, who testified about the dinner, the confrontation, finding me in his kitchen with his documents. He was good on the stand, earnest, hurt, the wrong son-in-law just trying to help veterans. When I saw Victor with those papers, I knew immediately what he was doing, Edwin said. He'd been looking for something to use against me for years. He finally found it. Did you explain that those documents were confidential foundation business? I tried. He wouldn't listen. He was already calling the police, already destroying my career. Daniel's cross was surgical. Mr. Gibson, those documents showed wire transfers to Delaware LLCs. Who owns those LLCs? Objection, Webb said. Outside the scope. Your Honor, Daniel argued, the witness has testified about the nature of these documents. I should be allowed to explore what they actually contained. Overruled. Mr. Gibson, please answer. Edwin's composure cracked slightly. Those were legitimate business expenses for the foundation. Business expenses that went to accounts you controlled? The foundation had complex financial structures. Yes or no, Mr. Gibson? Did you control those Delaware accounts? I had signatory authority. To move foundation money into accounts you controlled? Objection. Webb was on his feet. Sustained. Move on, Mr. Price. But again, the jury heard it, saw Edwin squirm. The turning point came on Thursday afternoon. Webb called an expert witness, Dr. Rachel Winters, a psychologist specializing in family dynamics. She testified about parental control issues and financial manipulation in parent-adult-child relationships. In your professional opinion, Webb asked, is it consistent with controlling behavior for a parent to track their adult child's finances, demand repayment of loans, and criticize lifestyle choices? Absolutely. It's a common pattern in families where the parent struggles with the child's independence. Daniel stood for cross-examination. Dr. Winters, you've never met Victor Harrison, correct? That's correct. Never interviewed him? Never conducted a psychological evaluation? No. So your testimony is based entirely on what Mr. Webb told you? I reviewed depositions and, based on what the defense provided you, you have no independent knowledge of Mr. Harrison's character, his relationship with his daughter, or his motivations. I can speak to patterns of behavior that you've never personally observed. Thank you, Dr. Winters. On Friday morning, Daniel called his witnesses. Hattie Morrison testified about knowing me for 15 years, about watching Faye grow up, about how I'd always put my daughter first. Did you ever see Victor try to control Faye? Daniel asked. I saw a father who loved his daughter, who helped her however he could, who was heartbroken when she stopped coming around. Earl Thompson testified about my career, my integrity, my reputation in the prosecuting attorney's office. In your professional opinion, Detective Thompson, would Victor Harrison fabricate evidence? No. Victor taught me that the evidence speaks for itself. You don't need to invent it when you're on the right side. Then Susan Rivera took the stand. Webb had fought to keep her off. Conflict of interest, he'd argued. Judge Morrison allowed it for character testimony only. Ms. Rivera, how do you know the defendant? Victor Harrison mentored me when I was a new prosecutor, taught me everything I know about building cases. In that time, did he ever suggest falsifying evidence or targeting defendants for personal reasons? Never. He taught me that prosecution isn't about winning. It's about truth. Webb's cross was aggressive. Ms. Rivera, you're currently prosecuting Edwin Gibson in federal court, correct? I am. And you're testifying on behalf of the man who initiated that prosecution? I'm testifying about his character. A character that benefits from my client's conviction? Objection, Daniel said. Argumentative. Sustained. But Webb had planted the seed. Conflict of interest. Bias. Corruption of the process. Closing arguments happened that Friday afternoon. Webb painted me as a bitter old man who couldn't accept his daughter's happiness. Daniel painted me as a citizen who'd done his duty in reporting a crime. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, returned at 8 p.m. In the matter of Gibson versus Harrison, on the count of defamation, we find for the defendant. On the count of invasion of privacy, we find for the defendant. On the count of intentional infliction of emotional distress, we find for the defendant. 3 for 3. I'd won. Edwin's face went white. Faye started crying. Webb gathered his papers with controlled fury. Outside the courthouse, Daniel shook my hand. Good result, Victor. What happens now? Now we wait for the criminal trial. May, remember? That's the one that really matters. I drove home through February darkness, feeling hollowed out. I'd won. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt like I'd lost something I couldn't name. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Unknown number. Mr. Harrison, this is James Patterson from the Columbus Dispatch. I'm doing a follow-up piece on the Gibson case. Do you have time for an interview? I almost said no. Then thought about Faye's testimony, Edwin's lies, the narrative Webb had built. Yes, I said. I have time. The article ran Sunday morning. Victor Harrison vindicated in civil trial, but questions remain about Foundation scandal. Patterson had done his homework, found other veterans who'd been denied assistance, traced the money through the shell companies, interviewed Valerie. The quote they led with was mine. I didn't do this to hurt my daughter. I did it because men and women who served our country deserved better than to be stolen from. If that makes me the villain in someone's story, I can live with that. By Monday morning, the story had gone viral. Social media erupted. Veterans groups rallied. The foundation that had fired Edwin announced an independent audit and restructuring, and Webb filed notice that Edwin's bail had been revoked. He'd violated conditions by contacting Valerie, trying to intimidate her into changing her testimony. Edwin was going to jail to await trial. The call from Faye came Tuesday morning. Her voice was small, broken. Dad, we need to talk. We met at a diner on Morse Road, neutral territory far from Bexley's judgment and Clintonville's memories. I arrived first, ordered coffee I wouldn't drink, watched the door. Faye walked in looking like someone who'd aged 5 years in 3 months. No makeup, hair pulled back, jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. This wasn't the polished woman who'd testified against me 2 weeks ago. This was someone who'd run out of armor. She slid into the booth across from me, didn't order anything. "Thank you for coming," she said. "You're my daughter. I'll always come." Her eyes filled. She looked away, composed herself. "The bank foreclosed on the house yesterday. We have 30 days to vacate." I absorbed that. The Bexley house, the one I'd helped them buy, gone. "I'm sorry." "Are you?" The question wasn't accusatory, just tired. "You won, Dad. Edwin's in jail, I'm losing everything, and you were right about all of it. Doesn't that feel good?" "No," I said honestly. "It feels necessary. There's a difference." She pulled out her phone, showed me a screenshot. An email from Edwin's parents. "They're cutting us off. Said we brought shame to their family. They've already spent over $150,000 on legal fees and bail money. They're done. What about Edwin's lawyer? Webb dropped him, can't pay the retainer." She laughed, brittle and sharp. "Turns out loyalty costs $500 an hour, and we're out of money." The waitress refilled my coffee. Faye ordered tea she probably wouldn't drink either. "I talked to Edwin yesterday. Prison visit." She wrapped her hands around her cup. "He tried to blame you. Said if you'd just minded your own business, none of this would have happened. Said we could have paid back the money eventually, that it wasn't real theft because he always planned to return it. That's not how federal wire fraud works." "I know that now." Her voice cracked. "I know a lot of things now. Like how he gambled away nearly $200,000. How he had an apartment in German Village that I didn't know about. How he paid off an accountant to hide his crimes. Valerie wasn't... I know what Valerie was. I read her testimony." Faye met my eyes. "She was a kid who made a mistake and tried to fix it. I'm 35 years old, and I spent 8 years making excuses for a man who stole from wounded veterans. What does that make me?" The question hung between us. Outside, March wind scattered old snow across the parking lot. "It makes you human," I said quietly. "People believe what they want to believe, especially about people they love. I testified against you, in court. I said terrible things. Some of them were true." She flinched. "What?" "I did bring up the loan. I did judge your lifestyle. I wasn't perfect, Faye. I was a father watching his daughter drift away, and I handled it poorly. But you were right about Edwin. Being right doesn't make it hurt less." We sat in silence. The diner hummed around us. Other conversations, other lives that hadn't imploded. "The kids ask about you," Faye said finally. "They don't understand why Grandpa doesn't visit anymore. Why Daddy's gone. Why we're moving to a smaller apartment. What do you tell them? That sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, that Grandpa did the right thing even when it was hard." She wiped her eyes. "They miss you." My throat tightened. "I miss them too. I'm filing for divorce. My lawyer says it'll be final before Edwin's trial even starts." She pulled out papers, slid them across the table. "Petition for dissolution of marriage, drafted by a legal aid attorney. I can't afford Webb or anyone like him. I got someone from the courthouse referral service. She charges $200 an hour, which I can barely afford." "Faye, I'm not asking for money, Dad. I'm telling you because you deserve to know, and because I need you to understand something." She looked at me directly. "I chose Edwin over you. I believed his lies over your truth. I stood in a courtroom and tried to destroy your reputation to protect a man who was using me just like he used everyone else. You didn't know. I should have known. You tried to warn me, gentle at first, then more direct. And every time, I chose to believe I was right and you were just trying to control me." She pushed the tea away. "How do I come back from that?" I thought about my career, about defendants who'd realized too late what they'd become, about the ones who'd asked for redemption and meant it. "You start by being honest," I said. "With yourself, with me, with your kids. You acknowledge what happened, you learn from it, and you do better. Can you forgive me?" The question I'd been avoiding. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, saw the girl who'd collected seashells at Myrtle Beach, who'd called me daddy until she turned 12, who'd asked me to walk her down the aisle because I was her hero. Somewhere between that wedding and this diner, I'd lost her. Or she'd lost herself. Maybe both. "I already have," I said. "But Faye, forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing to move forward despite the past. That takes time. For both of us." She nodded, tears flowing freely now. Can I ask you something else? Anything. Will you help me with the kids? Not money, just being there. They need stability. They need family. I can't give them much right now, but you could... Yes. I didn't hesitate. Whatever you need, whatever they need. Relief washed across her face. Then, something else. Fear. Edwin's trial starts in May. The prosecutor called. They want me to testify. Susan Rivera? Yes. She said my testimony about Edwin's finances, about what I knew and when I knew it, would be crucial. But Dad, if I testify, Edwin's parents will never forgive me. His friends, our neighbors, they'll say I betrayed him. Did you know about the fraud? No, not until you found those documents. I thought the foundation was legitimate. I thought Edwin was helping people. She paused. But I knew about the gambling, not the extent, but I knew he bet on football games, played online poker. He said it was under control. I chose to believe him. Then you testify truthfully. You tell them what you knew and what you didn't. You let the jury decide what it means. He'll hate me. He already stole from veterans and lied to you for years. His feelings aren't your responsibility anymore. She sat with that. Outside, the March sun broke through clouds, painting the parking lot in cold light. There's something else, she said. The foundation, the restructured one, after Edwin was removed, they asked if I'd be willing to meet with some of the veterans who were denied assistance, to apologize on behalf of the organization. Are you going to? I don't know. What would I even say? Sorry my husband stole the money that was supposed to help you. It sounds hollow. It probably will sound hollow, I agreed, but it's still worth saying. Those people deserve acknowledgement, even if it can't undo the harm. Will you come with me if I do it? I thought about my father, about what he would have wanted. Justice, yes, but also accountability. Someone standing up and admitting wrong? Yes, I said. I'll be there. We talked for another hour, about the kids, about the apartment she'd found in a cheaper neighborhood, about her job, still intact, barely, but the HR director had given her a formal warning about the negative publicity, about how Columbus, for all its size, felt small when everyone knew your business. As we stood to leave, Faye hugged me, really hugged me, not the performative kind from that last dinner. I'm sorry, Dad, she whispered, for all of it. I know, I said. We'll get through this. The gathering continued until late evening. As people left, each veteran shook my hand, thanked me again. Ruth Hensley hugged me, whispered, Daniel would have liked you, in my ear. After everyone departed, Faye lingered. Can I bring the kids by this weekend? Tyler wants to help you build something. Nina wants to plant flowers. Yes, always yes. She hugged me at the door. I love you, Dad. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on you. That's what parents do. After she left, I sat in my study with Earl, who'd stayed to help clean up. We worked in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from decades of friendship. You did good, Victor, he said finally. Not everyone would have made the call you made. Not everyone had a father who served, who believed in something bigger than himself. Still, it cost you. And it gave me something back. Not what I lost, but something different. My daughter's learning integrity. My grandchildren will grow up knowing their grandfather stood for something. The foundation's helping veterans again. I looked at the plaque from the veterans, now mounted on my wall. Some prices are worth paying. September came with cooler air and changing leaves. Faye's apartment, 4 blocks from mine, became a regular stop. Sunday dinners resumed, simpler than before, but more honest. Tyler and Nina filled my house with noise and life I'd been missing. The restructured Heroes Hope Foundation thrived. Under Bill's direction, with me advising on oversight and accountability, we approved applications Edwin had denied and funded new initiatives. The donations kept coming, people inspired by the story, wanting to help. I ran into Marcus Webb one afternoon at the courthouse. He nodded curtly, kept walking. Some defeats lawyers never forget. In late September, I received a letter from Edwin, prison mail, carefully censored. He'd written to say Faye needed to bring the children to visit, that he had rights as their father, that she was poisoning them against him. I showed it to Faye. She read it, tore it up. His rights ended when he stole from veterans and blamed everyone else. The kids will decide for themselves when they're older if they want a relationship with him. Good, I said. October arrived with autumn glory. leaves painting Columbus in gold and red, air crisp with possibility. One evening, working in my garden, Tyler helping me plant bulbs for spring, I realized something. I'd started this journey angry, betrayed by my daughter, dismissed by my son-in-law, treated like an obstacle instead of family. I'd reported Edwin's crimes out of duty and principle, but underneath was hurt. Now, I felt something different. Peace, maybe. Or acceptance. Justice had been served. My relationship with Faye was rebuilding, slowly, carefully, with new boundaries and mutual respect. My grandchildren knew their grandfather. Veterans were being helped. Edwin would spend the next 14 years in federal prison, his reputation destroyed, his freedom measured in decades. Faye was divorced, financially struggling, but emotionally stronger. I'd won the war, but at significant cost. Yet, watching Tyler carefully place tulip bulbs in soil that would nurture them through winter into spring bloom, I understood something my father had tried to teach me decades ago. Sometimes the right thing costs everything, and sometimes, if you're patient, you get back something better than what you lost. Not the same, never the same, but real, honest, built on truth instead of lies. Tyler looked up at me, dirt on his nose. "Grandpa, will these really grow?" "Yes," I said. "They need time and care, but they'll grow. Just like families, just like justice, just like redemption. Given enough time, the right conditions, and people willing to do the work." United States of America versus Edwin Michael Gibson began in May. Federal courthouse, Judge Brennan presiding. I sat with Earl, watching justice unfold. Susan Rivera's opening was devastating. Edwin Gibson stole $427,000 from wounded veterans through lies. When questioned, he fired employees. When discovered, he attacked his father-in-law. The trial lasted 8 days. FBI accountants traced every dollar through offshore gambling sites. $183,000 lost to online poker. Valerie testified about processing fraudulent invoices. I chose comfort over conscience until I met a veteran denied help while Edwin had $400,000 in the bank. When I confronted Edwin, he fired me and threatened to destroy my career. Thomas Martinez rolled into court in his wheelchair. I applied for a specialized chair, $3,200, denied twice while Edwin bought luxury cars. 4 more veterans followed. Applications denied, promises broken. Faye took the stand. I knew nothing about the foundation. I trusted Edwin. Her voice cracked. When my father found the documents, it took months to accept the truth. When asked about divorcing Edwin, Faye looked directly at him. My lifestyle collapsed because he stole from people who sacrificed everything. There's nothing convenient about realizing you married someone capable of that. Edwin didn't testify. Susan's closing was surgical. Edwin Gibson chose himself over veterans. Every time. This isn't complicated. It's theft. 11 hours of deliberation. Guilty. 14 counts. All guilty. As marshals led Edwin away, he looked at Faye with pure accusation. She didn't flinch. Outside, Faye told reporters, "My ex-husband hurt many people, but the veterans suffered most. Silence enables bad people. My father spoke up when it mattered." At her apartment, reality settled. "Susan thinks 12 to 15 years. "Good," Faye said firmly. "The kids deserve to grow up without his influence. The restructured foundation wants you to meet 6 veterans who were denied assistance. They want to thank you." "I'll be there," I said. The meeting at the Veterans Affairs Office brought 6 veterans, Faye and me together. Thomas Martinez, Sandra Brooks with her service dog, Roberto Santos, Jack Wilson, David Park, and Ruth Hensley, a woman in her 70s, clutching a folder. Her son Daniel was denied assistance, Bill Ramirez explained. "Was?" I asked. "Daniel passed 6 months ago. He'd been waiting for medical equipment, $17,000. He didn't have time to wait." The room went silent. "I'm so sorry," Faye whispered. Ruth looked at her steadily. "You lived in his house, spent his money. Did you wonder where it came from?" I chose to believe his lies because the truth was too terrible. Faye met her eyes. "I failed your son. I will spend my life trying to do better." Thomas wheeled forward. "Mr. Harrison, you could have walked away. Instead, you called the police. You let them tear apart your relationship with your daughter to ensure we got justice." Sandra Brooks spoke. My service dog cost $11,000. Edwin denied me 3 times. The new foundation approved it in 2 weeks because you didn't let Edwin hide. Roberto Santos showed a photograph. That's me at 23. Edwin denied my prosthetic upgrade, $4,200. I wore an ill-fitting prosthetic for 3 years. Got infections, nerve damage. Ruth opened her folder. A young soldier, bright-eyed. This is what Edwin took from me, my son, my future, my grandchildren who will never exist. Faye wept. I don't know how to make this right. You can't, Ruth said, but you can tell the truth. You can live differently. Bill announced the foundation had raised $280,000 from new donors and approved all denied applications. They presented me with a plaque. In recognition of Victor Harrison, whose courage and integrity ensured that those who served our country received the assistance they deserved. My father would have been proud. Faye visited Edwin in detention 3 days later. When she emerged, her face was stone. He blamed you, said we'd still be happy if you'd minded your business, asked me to write a letter asking for leniency. What did you tell him? That he destroyed lives for money and deserves every year. Then I told him about the veterans meeting, about Ruth's son, Thomas, Sandra, all of them. I wanted him to know their names. How did he react? He hung up and walked away. Even at the end, he couldn't face what he'd done. That evening, I had Tyler and Nina over. Within an hour, we were reading stories, building towers, making cookies. Normal grandfather things I'd been denied. Faye watched from the doorway, smiling. Thank you for not giving up on us, she said. Edwin's sentencing in late June brought everyone to Judge Brennan's courtroom. Edwin sat in an orange jumpsuit, diminished after months in jail. Susan recommended 12 years. The public defender argued for leniency. It rang hollow. Ruth Hensley spoke first. My son believed people would honor his sacrifice. Edwin Gibson taught him that belief was misplaced. Thomas Martinez followed. I never felt as betrayed as learning the man who denied my assistance bought luxury cars with money meant for people like me. 4 more veterans spoke. Then Sandra Brooks. I hope every day in prison you think about the veterans you hurt. Edwin's jaw clenched. Judge Brennan asked if Edwin wished to speak. Against advice, he stood. I made mistakes, got in over my head. But the media made this into something it wasn't. My former father-in-law weaponized his prosecutor experience because he couldn't accept that his daughter chose me. Even now, no responsibility. Judge Brennan's expression didn't change. You stole from people who sacrificed everything. You showed no remorse. The court sentences you to 14 years in federal prison, 3 years supervised release, full restitution of $427,000. 14 years. Edwin's face went ashen. As they led him away, he looked at Faye with accusation. She didn't flinch. Outside, Faye told cameras, silence enables bad people. My father spoke up when it mattered. I should have listened sooner. At my house, we gathered. Veterans, Bill, Earl, Hattie, Susan, Daniel. Thomas raised his glass. To Victor Harrison, who proved doing the right thing matters more than family loyalty when family is wrong. Later, Faye and I talked privately. Edwin said you weaponized your experience. Was he right? I recognized the patterns instantly, I admitted. Knew what evidence prosecutors needed. But I didn't create the crimes. I just couldn't look away. I forgave you months ago, I said. But I established boundaries. You're my daughter, and I love you. That doesn't mean I'll accept being treated like a wallet. Can I bring the kids by this weekend? Yes, always yes. After everyone left, Earl stayed. You did good, Victor. It cost me. And gave you something back. Your daughter's learning integrity. Your grandchildren will know their grandfather stood for something. I looked at the plaque. Some prices are worth paying. September brought Sunday dinners with Faye and the kids. The foundation thrived under Bill's direction. I ran into Marcus Webb at the courthouse. He nodded curtly, kept walking. Edwin sent a letter demanding Faye bring the children to visit. Faye tore it up. The kids will decide for themselves when they're older. October arrived. Working in my garden with Tyler, planting bulbs for spring, I realized something. I'd started this journey angry. Now I felt peace. Justice had been served. My relationship with Faye was rebuilding with new boundaries. My grandchildren knew their grandfather. Veterans were being helped. Edwin would spend 14 years in prison. Faye was divorced but emotionally stronger. I'd won at significant cost. Yet, watching Tyler place tulip bulbs in soil, I understood what my father tried to teach me. Sometimes the right thing costs everything, and sometimes, if you're patient, you get back something better than what you lost. Not the same, never the same, but real, honest, built on truth instead of lies. Tyler looked up. "Grandpa, will these really grow?" "Yes," I said. "They need time and care, but they'll grow. Just like families, just like justice, just like redemption. Given enough time, the right conditions, and people willing to do the work." If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.